According to the authorities in Kiev, every 10th Ukrainian is currently without electricity. The power supply interruptions are caused by Russian attacks on Ukraine's energy system. While most missiles miss their intended targets, others do a lot of damage. The difficulties are especially felt in Kiev. 4.5 million of our citizens are currently without electricity. I regard this energy-driven Russian terror as a test of our patriotism. First of all, I am addressing the local authorities. Please make sure that no one is generating unnecessary surpluses in all cities in Ukraine. This is not the time for marketing. I mean bright display cases, flickering signs, and other similar lighting. Russian generals cannot cope with the deteriorating morale of soldiers. The growing reluctance to fight leads to acts of desertion. Ukrainian intelligence reports that Russian forces have started deploying barrage and blocking troops. The task of these units is to shoot the retreating soldiers in order to force the remaining soldiers on the offensive. While the conflict in the Russian camp is deepening, the Ukrainians are constantly firing at enemy positions. We are attacking and driving the enemy out of our territories. It proves that we are well organized. After all, we are experienced in it. We have been fighting for 8 years. Ukraine has acquired 460 Russian tanks and 44 rocket launchers since the beginning of the Russian invasion. However, military equipment left behind by the Russians often needs to be inspected. Then, most of the vehicles are reused by the Ukrainians for further attacks. We are now in the workshop where we repair damaged vehicles of our brigade. There are combat vehicles here, both those that are part of our equipment and those that we took over. Although the influence of Russian propaganda on public opinion is very important, the Russians do not want to die for the imperial project of Vladimir Putin. Russia's strategy of achieving military goals is bloody terror. The Kremlin reports that the Kherson region will soon become the center of the fighting. Local authorities are evacuating the inhabitants of Kherson. Now, the people of Kherson should be removed from the zone where the most dangerous military operations are taking place. The civilian population should not suffer from shelling or any other military action, including the effects of an offensive or counteroffensive. The final displacement of Russian forces from Ukrainian territory depends on the willingness of Kiev's political partners to provide aid. The United States is currently the most involved party. However, the upcoming U.S. congressional election could change political currents in Washington. According to experts, Ukraine's support from U.S. government organizations may weaken if the conflict continues.
On the issue of whether or not the Ukrainians can take the remaining territory on the west side of the Dnieper River in Kherson, I certainly believe that they have the capability to do that. Most importantly, the Ukrainians believe that they have the capability to do that.
Ukrainergo, the electricity or power company, and visited a site that was struck by Iranian-supplied drones. And we now see that Putin's goal is to make Ukraine afraid by trying to make the winter dark and cold.
In addition, the G7 meeting began today. Foreign ministers are to discuss inter alia the issues of food shortages in Africa due to complications in the export of Ukrainian grain.
A collective G7, our work is to make sure that we maintain peace, bring back peace also to the region, and that we are there to protect these international norms. And so that's why I look forward to working with my colleagues as we mobilize all our resources to bring more peace and stability to the world.
One day of war in Ukraine will reduce the Kremlin's budget by almost $1 billion. Russia is gradually exhausting its military potential, and this favors the interests of governments favorable to Moscow. Belarus, North Korea, and Iran are reaping financial benefits from the conflict. Tehran, apart from drones, is considering delivering ballistic missiles to the front. The policy of non-member states in this war carried out in this way provokes NATO's opposition.
President Putin is failing in Ukraine, but he is responding with more brutality. In recent weeks, we have seen dozens of drone and missile strikes across Ukraine, including on critical infrastructure, cruelly and deliberately depriving Ukrainian civilians of heating, water and electricity at the outset of winter.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine led to the death of tens of thousands of people and the displacement of millions of Ukrainians. Material losses in Ukraine are at the moment impossible to estimate due to the scale of the damage and the ongoing attacks. Yesterday, the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, said that he would not participate in the G20 summit if Vladimir Putin was also a member of the meeting.